Hello everyone, this is Kilo21 and I'm here to talk to you about map pricing. One of my friends, Rob Norman, who's a great tech, was telling me about his thoughts about map pricing, and I thought I'd address map pricing in a video just to post up another Airsoft blog, and also to try to show you guys how map pricing is actually a good thing in Airsoft. First off, map pricing is a minimally advertised price line, basically, that a manufacturer sets for all of its retailers, for all of its upstream participants, just such as wholesalers or retailers, or basically any other intermediaries that are part of the distribution chain. And map pricing exists because it attempts to avoid or mellow out price wars. Wow, I just got into this huge thing now, because price wars in Airsoft were just running rampant, unregulated, just going crazy between the big four, Evike, GI, Megastore, and Airsplat. It was out of control. It was just too much. And to be completely honest, it was not doing the Airsoft community any good. It was doing the Airsoft consumer good, but not the community. And I'll get into that in a second. First off, let's define what a price war is. A price war is basically a phenomenon in strategic pricing philosophies. Price war normally begins in markets or industries that have many competitors with undifferentiated markets and undifferentiated products. What this means is that in Airsoft, we have just AEGs. They aren't anything special. You strip off that KWA brand, you strip off that ICS brand or that VSC brand, and you just have a piston-driven air compression-based gun. And that's literally it. And we're not talking about really incremental innovations or changes. We're assuming holistic changes. We're assuming really macro level changes. We're not talking about how the Lonix piston has 40% reinforced glass fibers or anything like that. Those are incremental changes. We're talking about how Tokyo Marui made the AEG. We're talking about those kinds of changes defining a market. And in Airsoft, let's admit it, we've had nothing but incremental changes, and that's okay. However, Airsoft is a perfect playing ground for price wars. In a price war, the goal for one firm is to outbid another firm in order to gain pricing power in the long run. Basically, what this means is that you're trying to outlast a competitor in order to gain market share, in order to gain the ability to charge more down the road. In reality, this turns out to just oversaturate the market with unnecessary discounts and over couponing, as well as a really skewed customer perceived value. And I'll explain this with a graph, my favorite part. So you have your normal supply and demand graph here, with quantity and pricing as the axis and supply and demand as your linears. Alright, demand's always decreasing and supply is always increasing. Not a big deal, right? Okay, this middle point here with P star as well as Q star, this point here, is our equilibrium. Let's say that's the ideal price for an AEG that you will pay with minimal value imbalances between the consumer and the producer. So up top here in this triangle here will be consumer surplus. That's the value that you retain after purchasing the product. So that's how much the producer could have charged, but they didn't. All right? This is producer surplus. Producer surplus, which also includes the retailers and wholesalers, by the way, includes everything in the distribution chain. The producer surplus is the amount that the producer gains in value after selling the product. So yeah, there's basically, I'll keep it as simple as that. So in a price war, instead of this equilibrium part, we're talking about somewhere down here. We're talking about price shifting all the way down. I mean, not P star here. We're going to make this P1, sorry. Price shift all the way down to P1, or basically resulting in really skewed quantities and a very monopolistic or oligopolistic views. So, but basically what we're looking at here is producer surplus after a pricing war decreasing, and this up here becoming consumer surplus. All this right here, all this is consumer surplus. Why? Because the consumer is going to gain more value after the unneeded pricing discounts. So you're probably wondering, why the heck am I even going over this now? Why the heck am I trying to justify this being map pricing being a good thing after just saying that this is good for the consumer? Just because it's good for the consumer doesn't mean it's good for the producer, and doesn't mean that it's good for the macro environment of Airsoft. Right? So the history behind this entire thing is Evike, Airsoft GI, Megastore, and Airsplat started throwing out 20, 30, 40% off discounts during Christmas and during the regular season, trying to lure customers in. It's a very common pricing strategy. It's cost-based and all, and it's consumer-based, but it might not have been the greatest idea because they were using misinformed pricing frame techniques. They were saying that, oh yeah, okay, this Linux AEG, it's $260, but with a 20% off discount, you can get it for this much. That's price framing, and it's an alright idea. However, when you discount, you're also saying that the value of the product is this lower price. It's not actually this higher price. That higher price, it's us actually creating higher value, and so we can discount it. That's what price framing is all about. But when these stores started competing against each other directly, they were participating in the airsoft industry as if it was an basically they were, I cannot say that word even though I'm an economist. I am such a horrible economist, but basically they were competing against each other as if they were the only ones that existed, these huge firms with a vast amount of money. Normally that wouldn't be a problem. You see pricing wars sometimes between large firms where these large firms are the only firms in the entire industry. That's perfectly fine normally, but in Airsoft, reality is that these big four are competing in a very competitive market with little product differentiation, as mentioned earlier. That's why this pricing war even exists. It uses they use basically market share gaining techniques, since then they shouldn't even be focused on market share. Market share has been proven not to even matter in a competitive environment. It really hasn't. Like the only times market share really matters is in when the market is saturated with only a few large firms. That's the only times it ever really is needed. Basically, what this resulted in was a near creation of this very geographically isolated superpowers all duking it out with all the little players such as Airsoft Outlet Northwest or Airsoft Atlanta or I can't think of anything else right now, but Weapon Blender, so stuff like that. Basic or Spokane Airsoft and Paintball. These little tiny players are struggling to keep up pricing wise compared to the EVIC, GI, Megastore, and Airsplat. So why does this even matter? Why do the little players even matter? Why don't we just invoke Darwin's survival of the fittest? Well, it doesn't work that way. Airsoft just doesn't work that way. The way Airsoft the Airsoft is a grassroots kind of game, I guess, if you want to use that. The macro environment is so geologically isolated that you can see it on Facebook forums. You can see the differences between gameplay in the Northwest versus the Southeast or California versus the rest of the United States. Dear Lord. And another reason is because these little micro environments that Airsoft grows in requires these entities to continue providing Airsoft, to provide a center of communication, a place to stimulate and motivate any consumers into and continue playing Airsoft. If that makes any sense. Now, with these geographically sustaining entities being outpriced by these superstores, Airsoft was beginning to suffer. No one could see it now, but in the long term, we're talking about people being affected by it like no other. I could even see it in my community. My community had this Radio Shack that brought in Airsoft guns, and granted, it was a bit higher price, but it was still a place to hang out. I used to work there, and Airsofters used to come in every single day and just hang out. And they would hype up the store. They brought up sales. And after EVIC, GI, after all these companies started coming out with 30-40% off saturation coupons, we stopped getting business. And what happened to Airsoft in my community? I'm the only one within about 50 miles that even Airsofts, except for one or two people. It's ridiculous. It literally died out that way. Because so basically, not only were the little grassroots stores suffering, but it was also these superstores that were suffering as well. Basically, pricing wars leads to backlash all the time. You have to make up that lost revenue somehow, right? Pricing wars only result in lose-lose situations. So, what happened? Who are the heroes and how'd they step in? The heroes were the manufacturers. And that's going to blow your mind, but bear with me here. Manufacturers recognized that their customers, basically the retailers, were hurting. Even though they had their big ticket customers such as EVIC, GI, Megastore, and Airsplat, manufacturers recognized that the macro environment total market share was decreasing. And these are Oriental companies. It's not stereotyping. I am Asian, but Oriental companies tend to focus on market share more than short-term gains. And they started recognizing this. And so they saw the problem as the US having a pricing wars with 40% off coupons. And so they decided to employ map pricing strategies to basically reinforce Airsoft grassroots and to structurally increase these routes. So what's the moral of the story? As much as we hate buying stuff at $2 or $3 more at local Airsoft providers, just do it. They're the ones that keep everything running, even if you don't know it. They're the invisible leaders, and I don't want to get into a discussion about leaders, but just do it. I mean, these large companies are even granted, if you have these places do have a bit more of buying powers as suppliers, and they can bring in more, but you're talking about companies such as Airsoft Outlet Northwest, Clandestine Airsoft, Brill Armory, what's it called, Airsoft Atlanta, or Spokane Airsoft and Paintball. Like, all these companies are actually the ones keeping your airsoft community alive. They really are. And if we aren't willing to look past Evike, GI's, Megastores, and Airsplat's overall marketing strategy, we might end up hurting ourselves because of greed.